Hello and welcome to the Daily Scripture Podcast. My name is Jerome Lavelle, and I hope that you are having a wonderful day today. Today we will be looking at Luke chapter 1, verses 57 through 66. When the time arrived for Elizabeth to have her child, she gave birth to a son. Her neighbors and relatives heard that the Lord had shown His great mercy toward her, and they rejoiced with her. When they came on the 8th day to circumcise the child, they were going to call him Zechariah, after his father. But his mother said in reply, "No, he will be called John." But they answered her, "There is no one among your relatives who has this name." So they made signs, asking his father what he wished him to be called. He asked for a tablet and wrote, "John is his name," and all were amazed. Immediately his mouth was opened, his tongue freed, and he spoke, blessing God. Then fear came upon all the neighbors, and all these matters were discussed throughout the hill country of Judea. All who heard these things took them to heart, saying, "What then will this child be? For surely the hand of the Lord was with him." Today, in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 1, verses 57 through 66, we hear the story of the birth of John the Baptist, especially focused on his naming. Recall that God blessed Zechariah and Elizabeth with John, even though they were well beyond the usual parenting years. He did this because of their faithfulness and because John was an important part of God's plan for humanity. John, who was Jesus' cousin, served the prophesied role of Elijah, heralding the coming Messiah. Remember that when John and Jesus were both about 30 years old, Jesus came to the River Jordan to be baptized by John and begin his role that God had planned. As we hear in the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, after John baptized him, the Spirit of God came down and rested on Jesus like a dove, and a voice was heard from heaven, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased." Jesus' ministry was off and running. However, before all of John's great deeds, he was born and brought to the temple to be circumcised as prescribed in Jewish law. And it was at that time that his parents conferred the name John on him, despite the fact that it was not a family name as was common or custom. Rather, Zechariah and Elizabeth used the name that the angel Gabriel had given to them, John, or Yohanan in Hebrew. What a beautiful story that Luke paints for us about his birth and naming. And it is these accounts and narratives of human interaction that bring the Scriptures alive for me, connecting heaven to earth and our daily lives. Consider the scene here in the hill country town called Ein Karim, just outside of Jerusalem. Zechariah and Elizabeth had conceived well beyond their parenting age, and Zechariah had a mystical experience in the sanctuary of the temple from which he emerged mute. All of this, I am sure, was the subject of much discussion around that area and in the town in the months leading up to the child's birth. As nature took its normal course and the child was born, I am sure the community looked on with perhaps a mixture of joy, for this child took away Elizabeth's shame at being childless, and anxious anticipation as to what type of child this might be. The baby boy was presented for circumcision in the prescribed ritual, part of which was giving him a name. And the Scripture says the people were going to call him Zechariah after his father, but his mother said in reply, "No, he will be called John." Well, this pronouncement caused quite a stir. I can almost see the people looking at each other saying, "What did she say? John?" Perhaps making a quizzical expression with their shoulders shrugged and their palms turned upward. Well, they didn't really believe or like what Elizabeth had said, so I'm sure someone said, "That sounds crazy. Let's ask Zechariah." With heads nodding, off they went to present the question to him, to which Zechariah confirmed in writing, "His name is John." I can almost see and hear the people saying, "Oy vavoy," which is the Hebrew equivalent of the Yiddish expression of exasperation, oy vey. And so they are saying, "Oy vavoy, I guess his name is John." And the point was settled. Thinking about this scene, the coming together of the ordinary and human, babies being born, gathering at the temple, rituals and conversations, customs and observances, along with the divine, the covenantal expression of the circumcision itself, and the name given directly from the angel Gabriel, we have the ordinary and the divine coming together in one scene. And that is my reflection today, this idea of ordinary and divine, and how our lives are a daily meshing of the ordinary and the divine. Too often, I have way too ordinary and not enough divine in my days, in my consciousness, in my thoughts, and my actions. And my prayer thus for all of us today is that, like the boldness of Zechariah and Elizabeth, that we make a habit each day of sharing our version of "His name will be John" to those around us. And we think about how we combine each and every day our ordinary with our divine. Thank you for joining the Daily Scripture Podcast. My name is Jerome Lavelle, and remember, our word of the day is the ordinary and the divine. Until next time, be well and be blessed.